The red light above the camera blinked on. They were live. Inside the stunning international news studio, 100 reporters fell silent. Bright lights beamed down from all angles. Giant LED screens glowed behind the panel desk. The world was watching. Captain Ibrahim Traoré adjusted his mic slowly, placed a heavy brown folder labeled Evidence on the desk, and stared directly into the camera. Across from him sat 4 American anchors, nervous, shuffling papers. A 5th seat remained empty. Suddenly, Traoré spoke. "This is not about politics, it's about truth, and truth has a price." Behind him, a massive screen lit up. First, it showed classified U.S. Embassy emails, then blurry images of sealed envelopes. A shaky recording began to play, a voice unmistakably like Donald Trump's. Laughing. The anchors froze. One leaned forward. "Are you saying what we think you're saying?" Traoré opened the folder. Inside were dozens of sealed affidavits, bank records, video stills. Then he said it, calmly, firmly. "Yes, I am suing Donald Trump for $200 million, and this is only the beginning." Gasps erupted. Flashbulbs exploded. The silence broke, and the world tilted. Traoré didn't speak again for 20 seconds. He just held up a photograph. 2 children stood barefoot outside a collapsed school. One wore a shirt that was far too big. The other had a rusted water can in her hands. Both were smiling. "These are Awa and Kader. They died last year, malnourished, not because we lacked strength, but because we were robbed." The camera zoomed in slowly. His voice remained calm, but his jaw clenched. "Money meant for West African food programs, $80 million, was rerouted through shell companies, through fake contracts, through names connected to Trump-backed firms." One anchor looked stunned. Another reached for her earpiece. A legal analyst in the corner whispered, "Is this real?" Then the LED screen behind Traoré shifted again, showing wire transfers to offshore accounts in Belize, the Cayman Islands, Dubai. He turned to the anchors. "I brought facts, names, receipts. You wanted a show, but I'm here for justice." The camera caught one of the reporters wiping away a tear. Then, unexpectedly, Traoré said something soft, almost like a whisper. "If this were your children, would you stay silent?" He dropped the next file on the table. It read, Exhibit B, the missing aid scandal. Meanwhile, just outside the studio, Trump's legal team was in chaos. They hadn't expected a lawsuit. Not live on air. Not with footage. And certainly not with hard evidence. One aide paced the green room, shouting into his phone. "How did he get those files? Who leaked them? We need to shut this down now." Inside the control booth, the producer hesitated. "Do we cut the feed?" But the executive director shook her head. "No. This is the biggest thing since Watergate. Let it roll." Back on stage, Traoré flipped to the next exhibit, a video clip from 2021. It showed a U.S. diplomat speaking at a closed-door event in Ouagadougou. "As long as we keep the contracts tied to DAP Global, we control where that aid goes." The room froze again. One reporter whispered, "DAP Global? That's tied to Trump's campaign fund, isn't it?" Traoré didn't answer. Instead, he looked directly into the camera and asked, "How many more children have to die before the powerful are held accountable?" One of the anchors started to cry. The lights flickered. The story was no longer just political. It had become personal for millions watching. And the storm was only beginning. The screen behind Traoré shifted again. A grainy cell phone video played. It showed a skinny 9-year-old girl seated on a clinic floor in rural Burkina Faso. Her name was Nafisatu. Her wrist was swollen, wrapped in a dirty cloth. A nurse knelt beside her, whispering, "We ran out of medicine 3 days ago." But it was her bracelet that caught the world's attention. Red, plastic. It read, "U.S. aid Partner Health 2022. Traore stepped forward. That bracelet was meant to mean hope. Instead, it became her death certificate. He pointed to another page in the file. It showed a shipping manifest. 500 boxes of emergency medicine meant for Sahel clinics. Rerouted to a private warehouse in Florida, never delivered. Then, slowly, Traore read aloud from a leaked internal memo. Delay delivery to West Africa. Prioritize new deals with domestic suppliers linked to DAP holdings. The anchors were speechless. One reporter whispered, "This wasn't just corruption. This was theft, with consequences." Traore held up the bracelet. For a moment, even the flashing cameras went still. She died waiting for medicine that was stolen, with a signature. And then, he looked straight into the lens. "I brought her bracelet here, so you'd remember her name." Within minutes, Trump's team issued a public statement. A loud, defensive voice played through studio speakers. "Captain Traore is a nobody. This is fake. We never blocked anything. This is just another witch hunt from a bitter African leader." But Traore didn't flinch. He simply said, "Play the clip." The screen behind him lit up again. This time it was CCTV footage, shaky but clear. An American contractor stood at a dock in Senegal, slamming shut a container labeled "Emergency Food Kits, Burkina." The audio, though faint, was unmistakable. "Just leave it. We got paid already. The rest's not our problem." The timestamp: 3 weeks before Burkina Faso's worst hunger spike in 10 years. Trump's face, shown live from his own campaign rally, visibly paled. Reporters shouted at once, "Mr. President, were you aware of these diversions? Did your companies profit from withholding aid?" Trump walked off stage without answering. Back in the studio, Traore looked around the room, then softly said, "This isn't about me. This is about every village elder who buried a child without knowing why there was no food, no medicine, no help." The anchor next to him whispered, "My God." Millions were watching and crying. Traore took a deep breath. Then, with shaking hands, he unfolded a crumpled letter from his inner coat pocket. "This was handed to me by a woman outside a clinic last year. Her name is Aminata." The camera zoomed in as he began to read. "To whoever sees this, I know no one listens to poor people like us. But if you do, please tell someone. My baby girl Fatim died with no food in her stomach. She kept asking, 'Mama, where's the rice?' One of the anchors put her hand over her mouth. Another wiped her eyes. I know something went wrong. They said help was coming. They said America would send aid. But trucks came and left. They never stopped in our village." Traore paused, then he held up a photo. A baby girl wrapped in a faded red scarf with a toothless smile. Fatim was 2 years old. Silence. This letter, and over 40 others like it, were locked in a government drawer. I brought them here, for the world to read. The camera panned slowly over the audience, tears streaming down faces, reporters silent. No one dared speak. And just like that, the lawsuit was no longer about money. It was about truth, and a mother's final words. A technician entered the studio quietly. He handed Traore a black USB drive. "This just came in," he whispered. Traore nodded and turned to the control booth. "Play the audio, all of it." The room went still. Everyone could feel something heavy was coming. Then a voice came through the studio speakers, American, arrogant, confident. "Listen, just cut the deal. Burkina won't even notice. What matters is, we get the supply contracts back to Florida, and keep Traore distracted." Another voice, female, answered. "He's not like the others. He's asking too many questions. Then give him a photo op, a small donation. He'll fall in line like the rest." The room gasped. One anchor whispered, "Was that?" Traore nodded. "A former U.S. official. And yes, that's their real voice." He paused. "For years they thought Africa would stay quiet. They thought leaders like me would be bought with small aid packages and fake smiles." He leaned into the mic, voice low and full of fire. "But they forgot something. I was raised in the village they robbed." Now the story was no longer just about corruption. It was about betrayal and resistance. As the broadcast streamed live across 89 countries, something unexpected happened. A U.S. representative seated in the front row stood up mid-sentence and walked out. Cameras whipped toward her. Gasps filled the studio. One reporter blurted, "She's storming out." "Why?" Traore didn't even flinch. "Because some truths are too loud to sit through." He pointed toward the screen again, this time displaying a procurement contract signed 3 years ago by an American contractor. On paper, the deal looked clean. But then, Traore held up a second version. Identical, but with one difference. The line for recipient country had been changed from Burkina Faso to private holding, South Florida. The evidence was stunning. This was money meant to fight hunger, and they erased my people's name from the paper, like we never existed. One of the anchors looked down, visibly shaken. This can't be accidental." Traore said quietly, "No, it was designed." Another camera caught a delegate in the back wiping his eyes. An African elder whispered to a journalist nearby, "He is not just exposing them, he is honoring the dead." And that's when people began to cry, not because of politics, but because of truth finally finding light. Traore took a long pause. He looked exhausted, wounded, but he stood strong. He reached under the desk and pulled out a pair of tiny sandals, worn out, one strap missing. These belonged to a boy named Yakuba. He was 8. He walked 5 kilometers each day to school with these. The camera zoomed in. The studio fell quiet again. That school had no water, no chalk, no desks. Why? Because the funds for it disappeared into a U.S. firm with no office and no employees. Another document appeared on screen. Yakuba Primary Project. Funds reallocated. Then a short video began to play. It showed a funeral. A white cloth draped over a small wooden box. A village mother sobbing so hard she had to be held upright. He died from an infection that could have been treated for less than $1. One of the anchors couldn't take it anymore. She turned away from the camera and broke down crying. Traore said only this: "If you still think this is just politics, ask yourself, how many missing dollars are worth a child's life?" The sandals stayed on the desk, untouched, and millions of people watching at home couldn't stop crying. As the cameras rolled, a soft voice interrupted the silence. It came from the back of the studio. A woman stood up, nervously. She was one of the UN translators, her headset still around her neck. "Excuse me," she said, trembling. "I need to speak." The anchors looked confused. Traore turned to her calmly and nodded. "Come forward." She took a deep breath and pulled out her phone. On it, an old voice memo. "I worked on translating U.S. diplomatic communiques for over 7 years," she began. 2 years ago, I was told to adjust the translation of a document about African food security aid. She hit play. A voice, cold and official, spoke. "Remove the part about delaying vaccines to Burkina Faso. Just say supply chain interference. That's cleaner." The studio froze. Traore stepped forward slowly. "Can you verify this clip?" She nodded, eyes welling up. "I kept it, because I couldn't sleep at night knowing what I'd done." And then she said something that crushed every heart in the room. "I have 3 children. If someone did this to them, I'd burn the whole system down." The studio broke into silence. Not shock, shame. Far away in a private compound in Florida, the mood had shifted. Trump's legal team wasn't just scrambling now, they were falling apart. One insider, leaked in real time to the global news feed, was caught yelling, "We thought it was just a PR stunt. Why didn't anyone tell me there were documents?" In the studio, another leaked clip played. It showed a video conference dated 18 months prior. A Trump-aligned contractor speaking openly. "Just cut Burkina off. They've got no leverage. If they complain, deny it. It's not like they have CNN." Back in the studio, a respected American journalist covered her face with her hands. Even she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Then came the bombshell. Traore revealed a signed internal memo with a Florida address. "This letter," he said, "stopped a shipment of cholera vaccines. Days later, 57 people died, including a pregnant mother and her twins." He paused. "This lawsuit is not about revenge. It is about acknowledgement that our lives are not a joke, that African blood is not cheap." Every anchor was silent. The lawsuit was real. The damage, measured in human lives, was undeniable. Traore stepped away from the desk. He asked the crew to dim the lights. Then he walked to the center of the studio, holding only one photo. "I want to show you something, not for politics, but for your conscience." On the screen appeared a heart-wrenching image. A newborn baby lying in a plastic wash basin, wrapped in torn clothes, his face pale. The caption read, "Emergency delivery, May 2022. Health center had no incubators." The baby's name was Ilas. He was born premature. His mother, Mariam, was told there was no incubator, no generator, no fuel. The clinic ran out of budget weeks before. Another document popped up. A budget receipt showing funds meant for that clinic, rerouted through a U.S. holding company with no known office. "He lived just 4 days, Traore said, voice shaking. 4 days, in a plastic basin." He folded the photo gently and whispered, "Ilas died, not because of fate, but because someone got rich." The camera panned slowly across the audience. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Mariam's voice then played through the speakers, sobbing, "Tell them he had a name, please, tell them." As Traore stood silently at the center of the studio, still holding the photo of little Ilas, a voice suddenly broke the silence. "That's enough." Everyone turned. It was one of the senior anchors, a man known worldwide, sharp-suited and respected. He stood up from the desk, pulled off his mic and said, "We are not a courtroom, we're a news station, and this feels like a setup." Gasps filled the studio. Even his co-anchors stared in shock. The man pointed at Traore. "With all due respect, Captain, are we just going to air one-sided attacks on an American president without any real cross-examination?" Traore didn't get angry. He just walked to the desk and opened one last envelope. Inside, a signed email exchange between the anchor and a Trump-linked PR firm, paid $120,000 to reshape narrative during upcoming African legal threats. The studio broke into chaos. The man stammered, I can explain." But no one was listening anymore. Traore leaned into the mic and whispered, "Even here, truth has to fight through betrayal." The betrayal didn't silence him. It only proved how deep this rot ran, and how brave one man had to be to stand against it. As tensions rose and the exposed anchor stormed out, another figure stood up, quietly. She was young, African-American, an assistant producer. "Captain Traore, may I speak?" The room went still. She walked to the stage, tears already forming in her eyes. "My mother was born in Ghana. She died in 2020. She always believed Africa was treated like a charity case, when really it was being robbed." She held up a small file of her own. While working here, I found something I wasn't supposed to see. An internal directive from a corporate media sponsor. It told us to downplay African lawsuits, said our audience wouldn't relate. She placed the file next to Traore's evidence pile. I'm not supposed to do this. I might lose my job, but some things are more important. Traore took her hand. You're not alone. Courage spreads, like fire. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters were crying again. The young woman's bravery added something new, hope. For the first time, someone inside the machine stood up, not for power, but for truth. The broadcast had gone far beyond headlines now. It had become a moment that history would never forget. Just when the room seemed to calm, the studio door opened. A man in a dark blue suit walked in, flanked by 2 bodyguards. The room tensed. Traore looked up. He recognized him instantly. David Lynn, he said, former logistics director at DAP Holdings. The man walked straight to the mic. His voice cracked. I came to confess. I can't carry it anymore. Reporters rushed forward. Cameras zoomed in. In 2021, I was ordered to delay shipments of malaria medicine. I knew it would kill people. I signed the rerouting documents. I took the bonuses. I said nothing. Traore looked him in the eye. Why now? David choked back tears. My daughter watched your broadcast. She asked me, Daddy, are you one of the bad men? I lied, but I can't anymore. He opened a folder of his own, 17 signed documents, 3 names of Trump-linked operatives, bank records. This is the final piece of proof. I know what I did, but maybe this will make something right. The world watched, eyes soaked in tears, hearts crushed. It wasn't just evidence anymore. It was a man choosing conscience over silence, live on air. Traore walked back to the table, hands trembling slightly. He placed a dusty brick on the desk. This is all that remains of what should have been a school. In the village of Gawa. The funds were approved. The groundbreaking was televised. But the school was never built. He turned to the screen. It showed aerial drone footage of an empty lot, broken cement blocks, and weeds growing through forgotten concrete. Then he displayed the project ledger. Millions paid out to contractors. All traced to a now defunct company, one of Trump's offshore shell firms. Where there should have been books, there was silence. Where there should have been hope, there was dust. Traore opened a child's notebook. The first page read, One day, I want to be a doctor. Nasir, age 10. Nasir died 3 months ago. No clean water, no clinic nearby. He never saw that school, but he kept dreaming anyway. The camera lingered on the notebook, and across the world, millions sat motionless. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about what was stolen from the future itself. The studio lights dimmed as Traore took one final breath. You've heard the numbers. You've seen the papers. But none of it matters without one question. He stepped toward the camera, now zoomed in tight on his face. Would this have happened if my people looked different? Spoke English? Had power? Silence. What would have happened if 57 white children had died from withheld vaccines? Gasps. One of the anchors quietly sobbed into her hands. You called it corruption. I call it war without bullets. A war against dignity, against memory, against the invisible. He pulled from his coat a folded piece of cloth. This belonged to my mother. She used it to wipe our faces when we had nothing. She told me, Son, truth doesn't shout, it waits, and when it speaks, it will break even stone. And then he delivered the line the world would never forget. Today, that truth speaks, not with anger, but with the voices of the buried. The broadcast feed shook, the internet exploded, and around the world, millions cried as if their own children had been lost. 2 hours later, A global court announced it would investigate. Sanctions were placed. The Trump-linked companies were frozen. But more powerful than that was what happened next. All across Africa, candles were lit. People gathered to say the names, Fatim, Ilas, Nasir, not as victims, but as martyrs of a truth that refused to die. In Burkina Faso, old women stood outside clinics whispering, "Traore did not forget us." Traore never raised his voice. He never insulted anyone. But he did something far more powerful. He told the truth. He exposed injustice with documents, dignity, and dead children's names. And he made the world look at Africa, not with pity, but with tears and shame. The broadcast ended with just one image, the sandals of Yakuba, sitting quietly on the desk, and a screen that read, "Some lies feed empires, but one truth and can shake the earth." If your heart broke for Fatim, if you couldn't hold your tears for Ilas, if Nasir reminded you of someone you love, then don't scroll away. Subscribe to this channel so we can keep bringing truth like this to light. Like this video if Traore's courage inspired you. And please, drop a comment with just one word, justice. Because every comment, every like, every voice adds weight to this truth. And maybe, just maybe, one day, no child will have to die for the world to finally listen.